This is an AI-generated discourse.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really cool study that asks a simple but honestly a pretty big question about all the work you do in college. It's about shifting away from assignments that just end up in the trash and toward creating things that actually matter.
All right, so let's really think about this for a second. Picture all those essays, those lab reports, all the projects you've ever poured your heart and soul into. You spend hours, maybe even all-nighters, you hand it in, you get your grade back, and then what? What actually happens to all that hard work?
Well, for the vast majority of assignments, the answer is pretty much nothing. It just disappears. Researchers actually have a name for this. They call them disposable assignments. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Work you create for just one person, your professor, that has absolutely no life once that grade is in the book. It's kind of sad when you think about it.
But what if it didn't have to be that way? This study looks at a really powerful alternative called open pedagogy, and the whole idea is to flip that old model completely on its head.
So what exactly is open pedagogy? Well, at its core, it's a teaching style where students go from being just passive consumers of information, reading textbooks, listening to lectures, to being active creators of knowledge. They're making stuff that can actually be shared and used by other people. Okay, so this whole approach really rests on 4 key principles. First, students are making things, not just consuming them. Second, they're often working together to do it. Third, and this is a big one, their work is shared with a real, authentic audience. And finally, it all ties together with open licensing, which is basically the legal framework that lets people share their work. All right, so that's the theory. Sounds pretty good, right? But does it actually work? Well, to figure that out, researchers talked to 25 undergrads from all over the U.S. and asked them about the learning experiences that really, truly stuck with them. They basically asked a really simple but profound question. Describe a memorable activity or assignment you completed. They wanted to know what actually made a difference, long after the class was over. And when they looked at the answers, 3 super clear themes popped right out.
Finding number 1, and this was a big one, real audiences matter. A lot. Students said over and over again that the assignments that stuck with them were the ones that had a purpose beyond just getting a grade. Knowing that real people, not just their professor, would see their work, that was a massive motivator.
And how important was this? Get this. Out of the 25 students they talked to, 21, a whopping 21 of them, specifically pointed to work they did for an audience beyond their instructor. We're talking 84%. So this wasn't just some small trend, it was the main thing.
Okay, the second finding was a little surprising. It actually pushes back on one of those main principles of open pedagogy we just talked about. See, it turns out that when it comes to group work, well, it's complicated.
Yeah, this really breaks it down. Students almost never talked about required group projects as a positive thing, the kind where you're just forced into a group. What they did talk about was feeling a genuine connection, a connection to their classmates, to a community they were working with, or even to an audience online. So it wasn't about forced collaboration. It was about authentic connection. And that brings us to the third finding, which might be the most telling one of all. It really shines a spotlight on a huge gap in how open pedagogy is actually being used in the classroom. Okay, so remember how open licensing was one of the 4 big principles? Well, here's the shocker. Not a single student even mentioned Creative Commons. Not one. And just so we're clear, Creative Commons is the whole system that lets you legally share your work with the world. The fact that no one brought it up, that's a huge disconnect. It means students are being asked to create public-facing work, but they're not being taught about their rights as creators.
So, what do we do with all this? What's the takeaway for teachers, for students, for anyone designing courses? Well, the study boils it all down to 3 really clear, actionable lessons. All right, lesson number 1. This one comes straight from that overwhelming feedback we heard from students. It's all about the power of a real audience. Look, the biggest game changer is designing assignments that don't just die after they're graded. When a student knows their work is going to be on a blog or used by a community group or even just shared on social media, the whole dynamic shifts. It stops being a disposable chore and becomes what the researchers call a renewable contribution, something with value. Lesson 2 is all about rethinking group work. It's about moving away from what we think should work and focusing on what students told us actually works.
And the big idea here is to engineer connection, not just force collaboration. The goal shouldn't just be put them in groups. The goal should be to create situations where genuine interaction can happen between students and between the students and their audience. That's where the magic is. And finally, lesson number 3. This one tackles that huge missing piece of the puzzle we discovered earlier. If we're serious about empowering students to be creators, we can't skip this step. We have to teach them the why of being open. That means talking directly about copyright, about intellectual property, and about how tools like Creative Commons let them share their work safely and ethically. It's about turning them into confident, smart digital creators. So when you step back and look at these 3 lessons together, you start to see something really big. It's a fundamental shift in what education can and maybe should be. And this quote just says it perfectly. The goal is to see students as creators and collaborators, not just sponges soaking up information. It's a move away from being passive recipients and toward being active contributors to our shared knowledge. And that really leaves us with one big question to chew on, doesn't it? If we know, and this study really shows that we know, that creating for a real audience makes learning stick, then shouldn't all schoolwork have a life beyond the classroom? Why are we still doing disposable assignments at all? Something to think about. Thanks for watching.